This is an old story from a time when bad news was not spoken of, and the mystical nature of the incident left no chance for public disclosure, though any screenwriter would envy such a plot. It was in the 1960s when a young family moved into a 3-room apartment in a barrack-style house. The parents had 2 sons, aged 4 and 7. Before them, an elderly widower had lived in the apartment. He had buried his wife long ago and had not looked for a new one. He lived alone on the first floor, with windows a meter from the ground, but at that time, it was a luxurious apartment. When the newcomers moved in, they moved all the good things left by the grandfather, such as furniture, clothes, tools, and other things, to the far room. They also moved their own, rarely used belongings there, as well as items they didn't want to throw away. They turned the 3rd room into a storage room. Moreover, there were no windows in it, and it was smaller than the other 2 rooms. Besides, almost half of the room was occupied by an old wardrobe against the wall. They settled in and seemed to be living their lives, accumulating more things in the storage room. But it seemed like a black cat had crossed between the husband and wife. Within a year of moving in, the couple divorced. The father moved to his parents' place, and the mother stayed with the children in the new apartment. It was difficult for a working woman with 2 young children to manage the household. She had to travel far to get to the factory where she worked, and she often had night shifts. But her eldest son was a great help to her. He helped his mother a lot, and managed to study excellently as well as wash dishes and floors and wipe his little brother's nose. But one day disaster struck. When she came home from work, she was surprised to find the door to the apartment unlocked. When she entered, she lost consciousness. Her eldest son, her helper, was lying dead at the threshold. As it turned out later, he had been strangled by someone. In the kitchen, in the far corner, the younger one was sobbing. In those days, murder, especially of a child, was an extraordinary event of regional scale. All the police forces were mobilized, but to no avail. There were no clues at the crime scene, no traces, no witnesses. The only one who could shed light on what happened was the younger 4-year-old son. But the child seemed to be mute. He had always been behind in his speech development, but now he stopped talking altogether. He only cried when they started asking about his brother, so they got nothing from him, neither the police nor his own mother. But life went on despite the tragedy. The woman still had to work and nobody gave her a break. However, her only son didn't want to stay home alone without his mother. As soon as she took the keys to the door, the boy fell flat on his face and began to scream in hysterics. Even going to the store for bread was impossible without him. And he would tremble and start crying whenever there was a sudden noise. But most of all, the woman was worried that her child had stopped playing and moving around the rooms independently. He only clung to his mother's hand for dear life, especially when they had to pass the door to the 3rd room storage room in the corridor. At those moments, the child would shake like a mouse and cling to his mother with all his might. Of course, the mother had peeked into that little room many times, but she hadn't found anyone or anything suspicious there. The small windowless room was packed with furniture and belongings. It seemed impossible for anyone or anything to sneak in and go unnoticed. Days passed, and the younger son continued to be frightened and startled. They had to move in with their grandmother for a while. Although it was cramped, the child felt much calmer there. But the mother couldn't stay with her parents forever. She had to go back to work, and her son had to go back to their apartment. The fear and anxiety didn't go away, though. One day, when the mother was at work, she received a call from her neighbor. The neighbor said that she had heard strange noises coming from the apartment. The mother rushed home, fearing the worst. When she entered the apartment, she immediately noticed that the door to the storage room was open. She cautiously approached it and peeked inside. What she saw made her blood run cold. There was a man in the room. He was sitting on the floor, surrounded by all the belongings that had been stored there. He was rocking back and forth, muttering to himself. The mother screamed and ran out of the apartment, calling the police on the way. When they arrived, they found the man still in the storage room. He was arrested and questioned about the murder of the older son. It turned out that he had been living in the room for months, sneaking in and out unnoticed. He had been watching the family and had become obsessed with the older son. One day, he couldn't control his urges any longer and had strangled the boy. The younger son had witnessed the murder, but had been too traumatized to speak about it. The man had been using the storage room as his hideout, waiting for his next opportunity to harm the family again. The mother and her son moved out of the apartment immediately and never returned. The man was sentenced to life in prison for his heinous crime. The story became a legend in the neighborhood, with many people claiming to have seen or heard strange things in the barrack-style house. Some even said that they had seen the ghost of the older son wandering around, still searching for justice. But the truth was far more terrifying than any ghost story. It was a reminder that evil can hide in plain sight, and that sometimes the scariest things are the ones we can't see.